So yeah, I'm a poet and professor living in Tennessee. I was born in Pennsylvania, and I mention these just because a lot of my writing is place-based. Um, a lot of my poems are also about being a woman in America during a moment that I think is anti-feminist. Um, I am a feminist, but I sometimes don't feel that. I don't feel that the world around me in Tennessee is particularly feminist. So No Spare People is my second book. I wrote it between 2018 and 2022. And I do imagine the book as being in conversation with Barn Burner, my first book, which Diane mentioned. Um, so with this book, I sometimes say that being a single mother by choice is the most essential fact of No Spare People. So I want to start with a poem that talks about my daughter and some of the circumstances of her birth. She is donor conceived, so that means that there technically is no father aside from genetically. And this poem is called At the Child Support Office. At the Child Support Office, the children were surprisingly calm. Later, I'd learn what my own child would accept, grown used to our nomadic life, but that was years away. Barely a person at 2 weeks. Unlike me, she couldn't focus on the men shuffling to the window to murmur words like cohabitate instead of what I would say, paternity. Use legal rather than familial words because we were in an open plan, echoing room that wasn't about families at all. I too had come to make a declaration that my baby was mine alone. At my turn, the clerk asked if I had proof, and I looked down at the fold of my child's mouth, her animal hands. I felt the diaper that held together my body ripped open not long before. I could hardly walk, but maybe that only proved, like her birth certificate, that I was her mother. You can't prove a negative, I wanted to say, but the nurse taking blood in the corner of the room wanted that. The man with his sleeve rolled up wanted it too. I see a father listed, the clerk said, and told me a French name, man piloting a swamp boat through my imagination. A stranger who, peering under our car seat bonnet, would be as confused as I am at how the state of Florida found a husband for me. Clerical error of a man. In response, I supplied the Latinate words that conjured my baby, artificial insemination, for all to hear, handing over the letter I asked my doctor to write. My word, I had to do that, get a letter like that. I've learned that I can't tell people what they don't already believe, but I fought for that blank space. This isn't a confession, but the facts that surround us, as everyone has. And once my child's fake father was gone, I thanked the clerk and ran through the parking lot through the gathered hissing geese. I drove home, opened my shirt, and on that spring day, fed my child. So I then, that's the second poem in the book, and I'll go back then to the first poem actually, which introduces a few of the major ideas in No Spare People. One about creativity, but also the limitations and freedoms that come with the materials of your life. That is, what do you spend most of your time doing? What surrounds you? What are the material conditions you live under? For me, so much of that has been mothering as much as it's been other things. So this poem is on the metaphor for women of birthing to creative activity. I was trying to explain that transposition between having thoughts and doing for others, because in every household, the metaphor is clear. The caretaker is a woman. And so when I began writing, I listed out my morning, the preparations and cleaning up of spills and toys, taking down and fetching, the driving and carrying of people that no one wants to know about if we believe in the reality of book contracts and job offers. I had an accomplished list, I believed, a specific and authentic record of the drain cleared, of stirring a pot and rubbing the back of a hysterical child. And through it, I thought I constructed a breathing replica of my life, the aspect in which I moved. But when I looked inside, looked closer, I found only the second wave woman, nearly the very same image I knew repeatedly as a girl and as a woman trying to write, "You are not this, you are this," these binaries again and again. Yes, my time was missing. I did not sleep very much then. I had ground myself down on the mill wheel of uncompensated work, but my thoughts beat bat wings against my skull, some of them more powerful than any idea I'd had yet in my life. I even wrote down all the things that flapped out of me at night, in hours I stole from sleep or was expected to use on my child. I wrote the way writing feels urgent when you learn energy has been expended to silence you, or worse, to get you to silence yourself. These ideas that I wrote and even tried to publish were utterly new to me. I couldn't have known them except for motherhood. And I wrote like this for years to an audience performing the great labor of the world, not only women, but so many of us. We who are asked not to consider aloud what we become inside, our prisons, schools, hospitals, our profitable dick swinging offices. We who are asked and then silenced by force, reduced pay and firings, dwindled invitations and the refusal of our words, belittled by stories everyone else seems to sign on for that tell us to disbelieve our lying eyes. In the midst of my work, running another errand or in the middle of the night, I wrote through it, learning women don't give up our creative selves. No child demands it, but we are made to concede by real people who benefit from all we relinquish, those we know personally and those agents of power who do their best to be invisible. And then we are told this uncreative life was a choice. The list I made on the day I found a dead mouse under the sink and buried him, when I tore apart my child's jigsaw puzzle in a glorious flying out of edges and fixed our washing machine with my own weary hands, it told me how angry I was at these tasks, a barrage I believed had worn my mind smooth. It explained why the writing came in pieces, but the list was not what I wanted to say, that I experienced joy because I've made room for it. I'm writing that while the metaphor for me of birthing to creative activity is in some ways correct, it is only the first move to conjure a woman's grievances, and it is past time to make the second. And so I ask her to speak. I call her forth. I open my throat. So yeah, that's a long first poem have in the book. Not sure that the poems I'm reading to you tonight are specifically focused on the joy of having my daughter, but there are poems like that in the book. Specifically the one, maybe I'll read that one later on. The last poem in the book, from which the title comes, has the line "No spare people" in it. That poem is called "What if Pain No Longer Ordered the Narrative?" So I'll probably read that one last. But before that, I want to read just a poem about, it's a relatively short one about how I don't fit and haven't necessarily fit in most of the places I've gone. I've lived in the South for 10 years now, lived in Florida, lived in Arkansas, and now I live in Tennessee. And so I just wrote a poem about what it's like when you feel a little bit at odds with your surroundings. That poem is called Homewrecker. You'd have to understand the home as a unified construct, as a guarded entity, locked up like a bank vault, a virgin, or like a rarefied set of collectible dolls with no inherent value but worth agreed upon. You'd have to really buy into that. The quality of the doll's corn silk hair or wee fingernails painted with real polish, the hardscrabble factory in Minnesota, where Slovenian immigrants hand sewed their 100% cotton gowns half a century before your husband was born. You need to assume that a man could be as pliant as one of those plastic factory-built objects, his limbs grooved to only move certain ways, careful turning the head as it's liable to snap off with enough hard twisting. Do you personally know a particular man like this, a vessel, or will any man do, whose attention turns lightly on a thick nearby thumb? Are you lucky to seize such an empty wisp of a man, to grip tight to that vacancy and hold fast, you good girl? So I was also thinking with No Spare People about what kind of stories we're capable of telling or what we're even able to think about. This has to do with a lot of my thinking about the South and maybe being a transplanted Southern poet, considering the relationship between place and story. I've written a poem called Real Arkansas, which is about my desire to understand the South, the land of the South, and also the history. How do I kind of reckon with it? Um, Real Arkansas. It's easy in the South not to get invited anywhere. Hard as a dime to parse public niceties from the truer, private kind. A barbecue where I can join the conversation. Not everyone is the same, bellowing to hang their senators, living and dying by the Hellenistic tragedy of SEC football, though some do. So I agree to a 4-year-old's birthday with my daughter, who, like most kids, beats her parent at making friends. Driving, I set my pilgrim sail to alien coordinates, geography whose stories I know are bad, race massacres, rebel graveyards, the tear down plantation where the county was founded next door to my apartment, swimming pool and central air on land worked by 200 in bondage. Nobody ever tells you how stunning the canopy is. Breeze pulling a long, bright coat, the landscape a terrifying Eden. Why not serve hot dogs stacked in a giant bowl like disordered Lincoln logs, rip our buns from grocery plastic, eat on the couch surrounded by big dogs and babies as outside our kids jump on a trampoline? No reason, but these people aren't mine. We're so glad you're here, one lady says to me. You're punching down, I hear a poet friend whisper at me 10 years ago. The place I came from isn't perfect, and some call it notorious. Yankee Town hung with Confederate flags, full of Sackler creatures and cousins clamoring for a race war. You're punching down again, I tell myself. I need directions to that cardinal north where the Sunday lunch is good on its own rather than an off ramp from my dossier of bullshit. More than that, it's been years since I talked to someone I called a neighbor, said anything more than rugrat homilies or regurgitated the temperature. Whatever the real Arkansas is, I've missed it. As I know to do, I talk to the women about our children, but not ever to their husbands. Fork a dog into a bun and squeeze a line of ketchup into its abiding valley. Have I driven past miles of irrigated fields by the interstate, blanched tufts in bloom, and acknowledged their surface aesthetics before digging into the carnage beneath? Our kids pump the triggers on their impressive water guns as I compliment the tea for being sweet, the dogs for being big, the people for their kind invitation. Maybe it's all I can do to live in limbo and call out, not me, to no one listening, to nod at each, we're so glad you're here, that rolls over me like a blessing, unaware I had asked for it. Okay, I'll read 2 more poems. This one is short. It's a sonnet. It's also included in the Mid-South Sonnets Anthology by Bell Point Press. I'm very proud that it's in No Spare People, though. It's called Baby Care Instructions. Before you lived, I lived inside my own loathing. Some parents have children to replace themselves, but we're 2 instead of none. Pushing you on a swing, sunset, my hands on your mammalian back. I remember how everyone thought I'd kill you by mistake, my throat in hives because I believed them. You made me too, daughter, drawing the last sip from a juice box, wisps of hair rising in the dirty breeze. I showed you how to kick to propel yourself, and all threat dips like the sun behind the jungle gym. I may have been born a knife, but my daughter won't be a knife, nor its willing sheath. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. so kindly to these and giving me your attention. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to Jessica Maury Collins. I'm excited to hear you read next. So this is the last poem I'll read. Again, the one the title comes from. Title of this poem is What If Pain No Longer Ordered the Narrative? Dinner, she pushes the triangles of French toast back and forth on her plate, forming amber currents of syrup, lifts a piece dripping to her mouth. I watch my daughter's jaw work as the restaurant clatters around us, an ordinary vortex of sound. And once again, I fix not on the object I love, but on her taken. All standard issue accidents, workaday shit, mostly crushed chassis and burnout wires. One of us will die first, and there are only two, no spare people. Such toxicity electrifies all of our meals, inaccessible, variable, thick, a theoretical her and a theoretical me, the only constant that I birthed her with a 38-year-old body, so those years divide us. In our pair, one will be left to singular loneliness on a future unspecified day. This is absolutely true. But today, she sips her milk from styrofoam, her skull painted with white blonde hairs, blue beat of her pulse at the temple, a 3-year-old with adult-sized ears. She'll replace me with another beloved one day, as children do. And if I don't let her, I'll fail, a different failure than those nights. She'll bring me books to read when I'm too tired, or years of my tone poisoned by the inevitable fiascos at work, my entitlement pooling in our home like carbon monoxide. I've operated as a vassal in service to a terrible king for so long. Tonight, I wrap her uneaten bacon to take with us and guide her arms to their jacket sleeves. I buckle her in. I don't groan at the train crossing. I allow another car to lurch into the lane ahead of us, and he flicks me the bird. In the rear view, I watch my daughter's eyes, and I don't even curse the titans of industry who set America on fire. On our screen, I pull into the long coast of our driveway, the home I pray she'll think of fondly once I'm gone, except I will never be gone. I carry her body inside, limp with sleep and curved against my shoulder, and I put her to bed. Thank you.